Vanakkam. Hello, friends. In the last few episodes, we have been seeing the migration of the Proto Indo European language speakers into the steppe regions of the Ural Mountains, down into the Zervashal Valley, and from there into the contact zones of BMAC and the Swat Valley, Pakistan, and carrying with them the signature greyware pottery, besides many remnants of a common material culture. They were herding cattle and goats. Cattle was considered as wealth, Lakshmi. They rode their horses and wagon, and later came chariots that were used for racing and warfare, weapons. Their burial sites contained weapons and not jewelry or artifacts, as in the case of other cultures that were contemporaneous at that time. They were a nomadic people who lived in no cities and had no brick built houses. In his work, In Search of the Indo Europeans Language, Archaeology, and Myth, J.P. Mallory, the American archaeologist, has traced many common elements of ritual worship across all the PIE languages, people who had no temples and no idols, nor was there a reconstructible term in any of the PIE languages to denote temple. But there was worship, often conceived as a hospitable reception, the guest host relationship Goshti that we saw in a previous episode, Aditi Devo Bhava, guest is God. The concept coming from the fact that the culture spread on a franchisee model, as very interestingly pointed out by David Anthony in his Horse, Wheel, and Language, where a guest, on accepting the hospitality and partaking of the feast and the gifts, had to eventually adopt their culture as well. Animal sacrifice, especially that of the power symbol of the steppe, the horse, the asva, the way in which the horse was sacrificed, its limbs were cut and placed in the burial sites, uniform throughout the steppe regions, described exactly later in Rig Veda. Funeral rituals were probably connected with the cult of worship of ancestors, accompanied by specific prayers and rituals, points out J.P. Mallory, who also traces a common word across all European languages, the Sanskrit deva becoming Old Irish dia, Latin deus, Lithuanian daivas, Old Norse plural divar meaning gods, the Old Indic god Dios becoming Zeus in Greek. All these gods were male except for the goddess of dawn, Vushas in Old Vedic, to Helena in Greek. They rode chariots in the skies, and the clouds in the skies were compared to dappled cows full of milk. Milk and butter were symbols of prosperity and became a staple part of the diet of the PIE speakers, because of which a genetic mutation happened. Out of the several mutations that happened that allowed adults to digest milk into adulthood, one particular mutation, 13910T, is of great interest to us. Why? This mutation, traced to around 7500 BCE in Europe, is the particular mutation found in populations across India. A detailed survey found that the occurrence of this mutation was prevalent more in north and west of the subcontinent compared to the south and the east, following the consumption pattern of milk itself. And Tony Joseph, in his Early Indians, points out interestingly that only a fifth of Indians today have lactose tolerance, that is, the capacity to digest milk into adulthood. Today, the veracity of the findings of the migratory paths of the Indo Aryans into the subcontinent based on archaeology and linguistics are authenticated using genetic evidence. We already saw how the first Indians, the base population of the country, carry the M2 haplogroup mitochondrial DNA and the D haplogroup Y chromosome from their forefathers out of Africa. Now, is there a similar genetic signature that the PIE people carried with them wherever they went? Yes, and that was the Y chromosome R1A. Dr. Peter A. Underhill, who heads the Department of Genetics at Stanford University and who is considered the world's leading expert on the Y chromosome, published a very important finding in the year 2014, the phylogenetics and geographic structure of Y chromosome HER1A. Now, R1A, and more importantly its subclade R1A-M417, is responsible for all these step Y chromosomes from Scandinavia to South Asia and was traced earliest in the Ukraine, dated to between 5000 and 3500 BCE. This Y chromosome underwent a mutation around 3800 BCE, dividing into two subclades, the RZ282 and the RZ93. The RZ282 is found only in Europe, where, remember, we saw in a previous episode how the Yamanaya people went into the European regions. For example, if you take the case of Britain, the incoming Indo-European language-speaking people, along with their bell beaker ceramic culture, something similar to the corded ware, carried this RZ282, ultimately replacing 90% of the native population that built the Stonehenge. The eastward step migration saw them carrying the haplogroup Z93, which is found in the Indian subcontinent, and the migratory path can be traced from across the Samara Valley in Russia, starting with 2800 BCE, going further east into the Sintashta culture by 2500 BCE, and then migrating downwards between 2000 and 1400 BCE, coinciding with the Middle and Late Bronze Age. It was found that the Z93 accounted for 68% of the Y chromosomes of the populations of the Petrovka and Andronova cultures that then touched base in the south, in the borders of the Zervashian Valley, with the BMAC into the Swat Valley, the regions of the Indus Valley civilization. It is very, very interesting to note that before 2100 BCE, this step DNA Z93 was absolutely absent in the regions of northwest Afghanistan, eastern Iran, and the Swat Valley. But between 2100 and 1700 BCE, when the first wave of Indo-Aryan migration happened into these regions, the Z93 traveled with them, and by the year 1200 BCE, samples of ancient DNA in the Swat Valley show a 22% presence of the R1A Z93Y haplogroup chromosome, the remaining signatures being that of the first Indians and Iranian farmers, the admixture of which formed the basis of the Harappan population. Now, David Reich, the author of Who We Are and How We Got Here, describes how a very important study published in the year March 2018, the genomic formation of South and Central Asia, that saw 92 scientists and research scholars from all over the world collaborating together. For the first time, this group had access to ancient DNA from the Swat Valley, from Afghanistan and eastern Iran, and this study was lead authored by our own Vagish Narasimhan, who heads the Department of Genetics at Harvard Medical School. And this study also saw the likes of David Anthony and J.P. Mallory being part of the core team. David Reich points out how, post 2010, the occurrence of ancient DNA from various regions of the world has going up steadily thanks to systematic archaeological excavations, especially the cold climes of Ural Siberia in Russia throwing up a lot of samples, and how this collaborative effort has thrown up a lot of evidence that is rewriting history even as we speak. Thus, the incoming Indo-Aryans mixing with the populations of the declining Harappan Valley spreading north of India gave rise to what is termed as the ANI, ancestral North Indians, while the declining Harappan populations that shifted further south and mixed with the existing population of peninsular India, who are termed as either AASI, Ancient Ancestral South Indians, or First Indians, giving rise to a new population group, ASI, Ancestral South Indians, that we saw in an earlier episode as well. The outcome of this was published in another very important study in the year 2009, which was co-authored by both David Reich and the scientists from CCMB Hyderabad, K. Tangaraj and Lalji Singh, titled Reconstruction of the Indian Population. David Wright points out how the prevalence of the R1A Z93 even today has a higher concentration in populations in the north belonging to the traditional priestly classes. The signal was especially high in the two groups of Brahmin Tiwari and Brahmin UP, the traditional custodians of the earliest layer of Proto Indo European language in India, Old Vedic or Indo Aryan, from which came the perfected and polished version Sanskritam created in this land. So, when in 1813 the polymath Thomas Young coined the term Indo European for the first time, it was thought that the exotic Orient India was the birthplace of Proto Indo European language and culture. After all, as early as 1583, a Jesuit priest by the name of Thomas Stephens had translated the Old Testament into Konkani and while on the job had declared that Sanskrit was akin to European languages. William Jones came a full 200 years later and declared the same, and this view was taken up by great scholars like Max Muller and Berger, who furthered it, according an exalted status to Sanskrit, which brought in a new sense of political identity and superiority among caste Hindus. And the earliest social reformer Keshav Chandra Sen famously declared, and I quote, "In the advent of the English nation in India, we see a reunion of parted cousins." But as the American anthropologist Thomas Trotman, an erudite Sanskrit scholar and considered leading authority on the Ardhasastra, stated, when the 19th century fantasy of the Aryan homeland began, there were no material remains, no archaeological findings to constrain the imagination. The scattered archaeological discoveries of the first half of the 20th century could still be forced into this previously established imaginary mold, but that is not so easy today. Though today, genetics, archaeology, and linguistics have conclusively proven that the direction of migration was into the subcontinent and not the other way round, the term Indo stuck, leading to many a misconception even today. And here it is to be noted that the signature M2 mitochondrial DNA that the first Indians carry is not found anywhere outside India and hence offers conclusive evidence that the migration of Indo European language speakers could not have happened from the subcontinent to the other parts of the world, as otherwise these populations would have carried this important marker with them. Interestingly, an archaeological find dated to around 3000 and 2500 BCE was made in a place called Shahri Shokta in eastern Iran, which is almost an outpost of the Harappan civilization, where three outlier individuals, ancient DNA extracted from them, in addition to Iranian ancestry, they also carried 14 to 42 percentage of first Indian ancestry. Now, this has been put down to a fact of the Harappans having trade relations with Iran, and hence these three individuals should have been traders who had migrated and settled recently in those regions. Today, further evidence such as the Rakhigarhi DNA that we saw in a previous episode, excavated in the year 2005, this 4,500-year-old skeleton threw up DNA evidence that clearly showed that it belonged to the AASI or First Indians. Airavadam Mahadevan, the noted scholar who gave us the Indus Concordance in the 1970s, clearly points out that the complete absence of the horse in the seals of the Harappan Valley is proof enough that it was a non-Aryan civilization. The lone remains of a horse excavated in an IVC outpost called Surkathoda in Gujarat has been established as being a domestic animal that was probably imported into those regions. It was actually the late Harappan phase, 2000 BCE, while Richard Meadows, a noted Harvard archaeozoologist, claimed that it was actually a native equid. Native equids known as onagers are large donkeys weighing almost 200 kilos per animal. And subsequently, in the same year 2005, came the next famous discovery of a cart in Sanauli, which was declared as a chariot, though the most important feature being that of the spoked wheels that are typical of the Indo European chariots was absent, and this particular vehicle had solid wheels that led to the scholars of the likes of Parpola declaring it to be a cart probably drawn by ox. Today, the Harappan civilization is being called the Saraswati civilization. Asko Parpola, in his Roots of Hinduism, points out how the names of many countries, mountains, valleys, and rivers are mentioned in the Rig Veda, and how the geographic description places most of them in the northwestern regions of Afghanistan and Punjab, whereas in later Vedic literature, the geography extends more southwards and eastwards. Based on the description of the places itself, he says that the best fit for these regions or names are found in Afghanistan itself and could be carried forward memories that the Indo Aryans brought into the subcontinent and recorded in the Rig Veda. And he gives a few pertinent examples. The river Oxus or Amudarya, on the banks of which the BMAC was founded, and the outlier regions in which the first wave of Indo Aryans settled, it is known as Raha in Avestan Iranian. Raha becomes Rasa in Old Indic, the Harsa variation that we already saw. Similarly, Sarayu is identified with Haraiva, again an old province where the Harsa variant is mentioned. Now, coming to the river Saraswati itself, Haraksati is the name of a river in Afghanistan that we today know as the Argandab. The description of the river Saraswati in Rig Veda as a powerful river with gushing waves capable of breaking mountain tops and slaying the foreigners is not exactly fitting of the river Gagar Hakra in India that has been identified with Saraswati. The Gagar, while in India, becomes Hakra while flowing into Pakistan, is a monsoon fed river that has dried up during several periods in history. It is found between the Sutlej and the Yamuna, while the Argandab is a Himalayan snow fed river falling from a height of 4 kilometers and joining the Helmand at about 700 meters, eventually forming shallow lakes and ponds. Saraswati means a river having lakes and ponds. While the interpretation of the Vedas by early Sanskrit scholars like Max Muller and Burgess, certain passages that denoted the invasion of the Indo Aryans over the regions of Punjab, the Aryan invasion theory today has been debunked by both international and Indian scholars. But the fact remains that, based on genetic, archaeological, and linguistic evidence, the Indo Aryans came into the subcontinent in multiple migrations, and their culture, language, rituals, and customs were absorbed and assimilated into the previously existing indigenous cultures of the subcontinent, of which one is the Dravidian civilization that our forefathers represented. Again, Dravidian, a term by which they were described by the Vedic people. We will explore more of this in coming episodes. Vanakkam.